You only get this feeling when you're with adoptees, you know. We all get it. Let me just introduce myself to anyone who hasn't met me before. I'm Gillian Bruce. I'm an adoptee. I was adopted in 1962 at 8 weeks old. I'm an integrative counsellor and coach. But the big piece of work that I do now is with adoption. I do support groups for two charities, which is Adoption Matters and PAC UK. I run retreats, oftentimes either here with How to Be Adopted or with Lara. And I've done adoption research as well for my qualification. I looked into the lifelong impacts of adoption as my specialist piece. So I've not stopped training ever since, really. I've just finished a 3-month course with an organisation called Smart Body, Smart Mind, based in Canada. And that was a 3-month training session all about nervous system regulation. So there's juicy things from that to share today. I chose this slide, because it was on Facebook. I just thought, that's how the world thinks adoption happens. You know, there's no little baby being torn away from the parents. They just drop out the sky into the arms of the waiting parents. So I just couldn't resist using that picture today, because this is not how we got here. And it seems as if the rest of the world kind of forgets about that. So that's why I chose this slide. And my session today is going to be it's about healing work. It's not going to be all grim, but I do need to talk about trauma first, just so to paint that picture. So we're looking at trauma and the body. So there's two types of trauma in the current thinking anyway, is that there's two types of trauma. So there's big T trauma, and this is generally described as a single incident trauma, a life-threatening event over which we were powerless. So here we're talking about, you know, nutter with a gun, car crash, war kind of episode, but some sort of big, major life-threatening event. The other kinds of trauma are small T trauma, and these are accumulated trauma, ongoing incidents that may be quite small. They might be medium, they might be large, but they're little things, maybe more subtle behaviours, maybe being ignored, maybe being left out, you know, just sort of being made to feel we weren't important, that goes on and on. So small T trauma is generally what we're talking about in childhood stuff. I mean, obviously there will be big T trauma as well, but it's my belief that many, not everybody, you know, granted, but many adoptees experience both, because we've got big T trauma, you know, the relinquishment and the loss of parents, and then we've got the ongoing, you know, living life as a child growing up as an adoptee, and we know what that's all about. So that's my take on it. So for me, yeah, big T trauma is that moment of relinquishment, which represents a life-threatening event to an infant over which there is, you know, no control, and it's equivalent to the death of mother to the infant, because the infant doesn't know, oh, you know, she's fine, some nice people are going to take over, you know, which is the theory. It's just mother's gone, and mother is my life support system. So that's, you know, really rather significant for an infant. And small T trauma, let me just get rid of this little window here, that's it. The many ways in which the adoption experience was denied, and the gaslighting images experienced and messages, you know, all that, oh, you were fine, weren't you? And, oh, don't you look like your dad? And, you know, just the way society, oh, aren't you lucky? Aren't you, you were chosen, special, which seems to gaslight, you know, the adoption experience. And the many ways in which our attunement and connection needs were just not met. In the ways our trauma was never seen or soothed, so we never felt safe or secure. And this is the 4 S's of secure attachment. With secure attachment, there are the 4 S's. Traumas, troubles, difficulties are seen, acknowledged, soothed via attunement, so the infant feels safe and therefore secure. And I don't know about you guys, but I certainly didn't get that. And then we've got the responses, you know, in the rest of the adoptive family, the wider family, you know, cousins, aunties, etc., and wider society at best, you know, and all of that. And just on this slide, you've all heard of Freud, the famous psychologist. Well, his daughter, Anna Freud, describes this. Compared to the loss of mother for a child, the horrors of war pale into insignificance. So I think that's pretty valuable. So how does it work then? So the point is that, I mean, as Claire said, not all of us were adopted in infancy, but early developmental trauma is seen to be what was pre-verbal. So if it happened before kind of 2.5, that's early developmental trauma, that pre-verbal stage. I was 8 weeks, so obviously pre-verbal, but that's generally what's categorized as what they now call EDT, which is early developmental trauma. And because there's no language, there's no cognition. There can't be many thoughts about it because we don't have words yet. So that's why early developmental trauma can work quite differently. So how it goes is this. Those trauma memories are stored in the body without language because we didn't have language at the time. Unlike other types of memories that fully engage and can be recalled by the prefrontal cortex, traumatic memories encoded quite differently, and it involves many different areas of the brain and the body. Yeah, so it's kind of all over the system. The brain's prefrontal cortex, with the logic and the language area, which is Broca's area of the brain, is inhibited during traumatic experiences. So whether that's early childhood or, as an adult. So if we experience trauma, again, attacked in the street and wallet stolen, once again, even then, the prefrontal cortex goes offline. Yeah, and we're inhibited. So logic and language are inhibited during any kind of trauma. But infants' brains have no pre-trauma memory and are built by experience and are in the right brain, which is all about emotion, because there isn't logic at this point. So infants' brains it's really quite a different thing to have trauma in infancy. This business of no pre-trauma memory. Let's just say you're walking down your familiar high street and you're mugged for your mobile phone and your purse by 2 big lads. Yeah. Of course, you're going to have a traumatic experience. You might avoid the high street for a few weeks, but eventually your pre-trauma memory kicks in and goes, hang on a minute. I've been down this street 1,000 times. I've been safe as houses. This is a one-off event, and we can calm ourselves down. But if our trauma happens before any other memory, then we have no pre-trauma memory to work from. So life is traumatic. This is life-threatening. So anything that triggers that will also feel life-threatening, because the brain is built by accretion. It's built by experience. So if that first experience is traumatic, that's the way the brain's going to develop. And babies are all right brain. And that's why it's pointless trying to reason and apply logic with toddlers having a tantrum, because the left brain stuff isn't online yet. So we're all right brain, we're all emotion, there's no language, and there's no pre-trauma memory. So this is a really different experience than, your typical adult kind of trauma, if you like. So how it works, again, let me just reclaim my watch from the floor there. So memories of trauma are body symptoms. Unprocessed trauma modifies the whole nervous system. So just let that land for a second. Unprocessed trauma modifies the whole nervous system. Trauma memories are stored as fragments, multiple areas of the brain, of course, in the limbic system, where we've got the amygdala and we've got all the adrenaline and cortisol stored, but they're stored in many other areas. And they're stored as implicit memory and activated through the body via triggers. And this is why triggering's always been hard to understand. When we might say, been triggered, that's why it's tricky, because it's taken us right back, to that stored implicit memory. This is threatening. This is threatening. And activated through the body. So we don't think our way into triggering. It's the body doing that job to keep us safe. So the other thing with early adoption, particularly, there's no concise narrative to provide to other human beings, i.e. a counsellor or our dearest friends. Our traumatic memories are visceral, so that in the viscera, you know, this sort of top half of the body and right down into the belly, and they're overwhelming. And from that visceral response, you'll get a reaction down into the rest of the body system, into the arms, into the legs, into those fight-flight muscles, and all the rest of the system. So we are really dealing with something a little bit different in the way we need to maybe set about healing ourselves. The limbic system is highly activated during trauma, but it holds no language and has no cognitive abilities like the prefrontal cortex. So it can't work stuff out. Yeah, it's just a simpler, much more, if you like, more primary form. We naturally, as adults, want to put words to the turmoil within us, which is either generally going to be shame, anger, or fear. And maybe all of that. You know, and others expect that of us as well. Well, you know, come on then, tell us what it's all about. But maybe we don't have those words. Maybe it just sits in the system as a, you know, as a feeling, a sensation, a way of being that we don't have words for. And that's why being with other adoptees is so special, because here we don't need those words. We get it. You know, we all have that same thing inside of us that has no words, but it's in the limbic system and it can't really use language or cognitive reasoning. But yep, the classic kind of responses that we'll hold within us will be shame, anger, fear, and in any particular ordering. So maybe fear's top of the shop, and then anger, and then shame. Or it might be that it's shame first and foremost, and then fear, and then anger. So it doesn't matter which way round that's stored in us. Generally, there'll be degrees of that in the system. It might be overwhelming, it might be more reduced than that, but that's the kind of stuff that's going on. So instead, then, trauma memories are fragmented, body-based, and stored in multiple areas. And it doesn't really have a nice, clean story narrative through language. So we can tell our adoption story, but it's harder to describe. Of course, we can't remember the event, but you know, that whole experience of what it's like. So we need to work on accessing and processing trauma via the body. So hope that's questions can come later as well, by the way. So as a result of everything we've said so far, we can kind of get to a point where we understand talking therapy can only get us so far. You know, we can explain, we can talk about behaviours, we can talk about what triggers us, what our difficulties were. But if we're really going to fix and stop us getting as triggered as we do, we need to work in the body. Okay. Symptoms, body reactions and triggers are actually memories. They're the way the nervous system remembers the experience and responds to similar enough experiences. So anything that has a few ingredients similar to an old trauma will be enough to trigger that feeling. And I've had quite a few of these, you know, in my system. So anything that was a bit scary when I was young, if there's anything similar enough to that now, it will still trigger me. And have I got time to tell the maths lesson story? Yes, I have. What I mean by this is, I'll just tell this real quick, just so you'll get what I'm talking about. My father was an accountant and he was a very distant, formal gentleman. So when it came to my O-levels, my father, of course, was going to give me maths lessons. And it was terrifying. He would sit me down at the dining table, shut the door, and we'd try and have these hideous maths lessons. And I would just freeze, couldn't think, would end up in tears. Father would end up shouting, big man. It was terrifying. And it really, I was completely triggered in those maths lessons. I dreaded it, you know, because it was just dreadful and maths isn't my thing. So that was the first experience. Note some of those ingredients. Fast forward 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, my partner at the time, Chris, lovely fella, also an accountant, would sit down with me to do these diary meetings because we had to manage childcare and all that. So we sat down in the dining room with books out and he shuts the door And he used to get a bit anxious about doing these diary meetings, so we would go a bit formal. And that was enough. I had a complete meltdown, flew out the dining room, you know, in a complete triggered rage, didn't know why. And then once that subsided, I was able to go, maths lessons. Dining room, sitting at a table, door closed, formal atmosphere, kaboom. That's a triggered experience. So even there was no cognition, wasn't thinking about it at all. I just was getting more and more het up. And the flight response just kicked in. Flight and fight, psh, I'm out of there. So that's how triggering works. And it doesn't have to be as dramatic as that. You know, it might be smaller early experience that wasn't very nice. Anything similar enough, down the line, will trigger, if you like, in the same way. So we need help, but not only with our emotions, but with our somatic experiences. Healing trauma must be slow because we're not simply working on the way we think or patterns of behaviour, because actually what's going on is below that or underneath that. So talking therapy won't ever be enough for trauma healing, because we're asking the entire nervous system to make the changes necessary to bring felt safety into the body. That's what we're after. Felt safety in the body, so that I can be my true, authentic, real self and feel safe enough in my own skin is the goal. So this is really well recognised. Antonio Damasio, who was a famous psychologist, says the core of our self-awareness rests on the physical sensations that convey the inner states of the body. So the sensations we're experiencing are conveying to us the inner state, what's going on for us. So that's the work that really is going to pay some dividends. And another little aside that I only came across yesterday, but I thought I must share this. Donald Winnicott, who was one of the very early mother-infant researchers and psychotherapist, but really did a lot of research. Look up Donald Winnicott if you fancy it. He said this: insufficient attachment equals a fracture between mind and body. And they knew this in the 60s. So this is exactly what we're talking about. Because we've had insufficient attachment, there's a fracture between the mind and the body. So our body is less known to us than it would be with people with good attachment. So this little picture seems to sum it up quite nicely for me. This is a real simplified version of the nervous system, which is pretty complex. But for the purposes of today, I'm going to use this picture. So this is the trauma thermometer. So we can see at the top, the red zone, we're boiling. And this is when we're over-activated, adrenalized, dysregulated. We're completely, worked up in whatever way we get worked up. So it might be that the body is jumpy, the head is buzzy, thoughts are whizzing. It's just too hot. It's just too much feeling. Coming down the thermometer, we get to that kind of yellow-green state, which is the just right space. What I'm calling on the right-hand side of the screen is the steady state. I'm calm, I'm awake, I can think and I can feel, I can come up with creative solutions to problems. I'm in my complete best self. But as we go down, we're going into the freeze response, where we're underactivated. It's too cold emotionally, that means. Not enough feeling. The body is sleepy. My head is empty. And this reminds me of that whole trauma response, which is don't think, don't feel, don't speak, because I'm just in that kind of freeze response. So those are the states that are generally described. Red, overactivated, adrenalized. Green, steady state, at my best. Blue, the freeze state, underactivated. I might even be disassociated. I might be in complete shutdown or somewhere on a scale along there. But lastly, we've got this newly understood combination state of functional freeze. And the car analogy is used here. So imagine you sit in your car, you've got one foot revving the accelerator, vroom, vroom, go, 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 and the other foot slammed on the brake. Can you imagine what the car would be doing? The wheels would be spinning, but it's all locked up. And that's what functional freeze is like. And, you know, quite a lot of adoptees I know do recognise a functional freeze, where I'm wanting to maybe fight, flight, maybe shout, yell, maybe feeling triggered on the one hand, but the freeze response is coming in and going, bump, no, you don't, it's not safe. So the freeze response keeps us in our seat, because actually we don't want to display the either the fight or the flight. So that's functional freeze. And most of us will probably have experienced that. Okay. So the work we have to do, this is what it's all about, is we've got 3 body pieces to develop and build upon. Quick slurp, voice is drying up. Thank you. So when we're in the red at the top of that thermometer, you know, we really need to develop our ability to just sense our level of arousal and calm our system when it's in the red. Because oftentimes it's subconscious. You know, we're operating, we're feeling that, maybe that revved up thing, but actually it's out of our conscious awareness. It's just blooming uncomfortable. Next is this green section. We need to develop our ability to expand the pro-social system, which is, in nervous system speak, the ventral vagal green zone, which is, this is where actually it really does us some good to be with others, safe others. This would be, you know, our favourite people we can be comfortable with, relax with, and we can do harmonious activities together, having fun, joint projects. You know, maybe we're decorating the hall together, flicking paint, having fun, or any activity, and being our authentic selves. So that's the job is to grow that space. And finally, develop our ability to activate our system out of the blue zone. So when we're in that shut down, numb, frozen, to be able to lift out of that enough to hold our boundaries and express some healthy anger. You know, we need some healthy anger. That first piece that, you know, we might notice 2-year-olds when they start going, no, mine. That's them starting to hold some boundaries and express healthy anger. Yeah, so that's the job at hand, really, is to start to manage the nervous system in those ways. So this is all about self-awareness. It's developing that self-awareness and listening to the body. I don't know if you can see the words at the bottom there. It says, listen to your body. It's smarter than you are. And this is kind of the message, really. So the practice is to develop paying dual attention, which means I can be interacting in the moment, maybe having a chat with somebody and it's turning into a difficult interaction, and we're noticing we're having to think and respond to that person. And oftentimes for us, the body might be bracing, you know, we might be locking up in the chest and the stomach, but actually we're unaware of it. So our job is to develop dual attention so that we can have our attention in the difficult experience, making our responses and noting, okay, I've locked up. Okay, my system's braced. I've got tension in my arms. You know, I'm clenching my fists here. And being able to pay enough attention in that moment to soften out that nervous system response. So, self-awareness is the starting point. We need to get familiar enough with our internal world so we can understand how our trauma responses operate within us, because we'll all be a little bit different, and what they generate in terms of our behaviours. So it may be I'm having a difficult interaction with somebody and I notice I've locked up inside and I'm noticing that I'm actually talking a little bit more tensely now, and other people see that as our difficult behaviour. So it's making that link between how am I responding here, what's going on in my body, and what's that doing to my behaviour in the external world. Easy, eh? So we know now that there are 6 recognised trauma typical reactions, which are fight and flight, which you already know, freeze, shut down and all that, fawn, attach and cry for help, and submit and collapse. They're the newly recognised 6 responses to trauma. So freeze and fawn, and this is new understanding, often come closely coupled together, because we might freeze but have someone to deal with who's scary, in which case we're going to fawn. And the metaphor that I heard was, imagine you work in a bank. In comes the guy with a gun demanding some money. First of all, you're going to freeze. Then we'll go straight into the fawn response. Yes, sir. Sure. Yes, I'll get the £5,000 notes now. I've got this nice bag. Would you like that? And we go into fawn. So those of us that have anything like a please others tendency, a tendency to people please, be assured you're not doing it, your body is. It's the fawn response, which is absolutely sensible. It's designed to keep us safe. All we have to do now is keep a watch on it and notice when we're doing it and adjust responses. So you get fight and flight up in the top end of the nervous system. That's your sympathetic nervous system. Freeze and fawn are coming more from the parasympathetic nervous system. Attach and cry for help is when we feel really vulnerable and lost, where we might just look for anybody to latch onto and cry for help to. And submit and collapse is really when it's at its worst. This would be a hostage situation, domestic violence situation. It would be that kind of place when we're in that complete submit and collapse. So we know that feeling adrenalized or blank shut down can feel like our normal. We've operated this way for so long that often we don't even notice. The times when I've suddenly gone, oh, blimey, I'm all locked up. But I've been like that for 20 minutes. So it's a bit of an ask to start to notice our bodies in these ways because it's our normal. And we're not used to kind of noting it because it's not out of the ordinary. For the muggles out there, it is out of the ordinary, but it's not for us. It's how we live. So developing that internal self-awareness is stage one, really. So how are we going to know? So I'm going to give some examples here. So we know that when we're over aroused in that red zone, this is what we might say adrenalized, revved up. It's characterized by the feeling of need to move. So I've got to either fight or flight. So we might be in go, 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 or do, do, do. We might feel a bit revved up, energized, or needing to burn off some adrenaline by going for a run, a good walk, or to exercise. I know whenever Chris and I used to have a row, I had to erupt out of the house and go stomping around the block because it was that fight response. We may notice that our muscles are tense or engaged in the arms, shoulders, and hands. And this is that mild fight response. The arms are tensed, ready for action. I know top of my arms get really tight if I'm angry, because I've gone into mild fight mode, yeah. Or that our legs are lively, fidgety, or tense, which might be that mild flight mode. So we need to go now. It's like, get me out of here. We might notice that we feel pent up, a little bit impatient by the slowness of others. Say you're running late and other people are like dawdling along. And we're going, come on! We get that impatience because the stress of the lateness is putting us into the flight or fight response. We might notice that we feel energized and in need of a bit of a challenge, something new or something edgy. And then we feel a bit bored, like fed up and, oh, yeah, that's kind of low level activated. We may be drawn to others that feel edgy, or projects, activities that feel a bit risky or adrenalizing, but we go for it anyway. I've done this all my life. I was a training consultant. I used to do presentations to audiences of hundreds, and it was terrifying and adrenalizing, but I did it anyway because we're used to being adrenalized. So it's got to be quite high level to others for it to feel adrenalizing for us because we're pretty adrenalized normally. So the stomach might be clenched in tension or other areas where we hold tension, such as the shoulders, jaw, arms, legs, hands and feet. So these, and there's tons more, and you'll have your own, but these are some of the clues that we're in the red zone. It might be high, it might be low level red zone, but these are the kind of things I experience anyway. And we can discuss in our breakout rooms how you guys do it. There isn't a right or wrong here, by the way. So we also need to be aware in body and emotions of when we're at the other end. So when we're in that freeze response. This can be much more subtle. It might be a major disassociation. I've checked out, I'm not present anymore. Or it might be just a little bit shut down. There's a whole range here. So things like we may notice that our mind feels blank. That kind of, oh, I can't think. Ugh. We may notice that we don't feel anything. It all feels a bit blank. We may not feel able to speak. And certainly this is what I experience if I'm with a threatening big guy. My dad was a big guy. So, if I'm around big men that are angry, that's exactly what happens to me. Blank, can't think, can't feel, can't speak. Because I get that freeze response. We may feel numb, checked out, disassociated, shut down, just dead still, or sleepy, or depressed, that sort of flat down. And we may take a while to come out of the freeze state and then be able to process events more clearly later. And that's when, maybe you've been in a difficult interaction and half an hour later you're going, why didn't I say that? I could have said this, I could have said that. But, the freeze response took our voice. So that's quite common. So what are we going to do? So here are some top tips then. So these are my last few slides here of how are we going to bring down over arousal then? Well, the skill is called interoception. And interoception is about actually feeling and acknowledging and working with what's going on in the body to bring us down into that green state. So first you might want to release the pent-up energy. Just get rid of the build-up. Burn off the adrenaline with exercise, walk, run, lift weights, shake, tap and hum, wood chop, squeeze a towel or do some TRE. And I can briefly explain, when we shake, it's literally like you see prey animals, shaking out their tension. Tapping is the EFT method. But if you tap and hum at the same time, the humming actually is vibrating the vagus nerve and it's sending down vibrations of okayness. So the vagus nerve is the brain to gut superhighway. Years ago, we used to talk about mind and body, and in the 70s, they thought it was all very hippie. And now we know there is indeed a brain to gut superhighway, and it's the vagus nerve. Messages go from the gut to the brain at 80%, and from the brain to the gut at 20%. So you can actually talk to your gut using your brain. You can tell your brain and your system, I'm all safe. This is not a life-threatening event. We're actually okay. This isn't life-threatening, and your gut will hear you. So tap and hum, that's that one. Wood chop is when you stand and you raise your arms above your head as if you're clenching an axe, and you bring it down with a big out breath and swing those arms down fast and let the breath out. And that is a really good way of releasing pent-up energy. Or really squeeze a towel, if you've got anger, squeeze a towel. And TRE is something that I probably don't have time to explain now, but Google it. TRE stands for trauma releasing exercises, and I did some this very morning. You can cry, yell, growl, shout if you're angry. We store up this fight response, but animals don't go straight from noticing a threat to attack. And if a dog starts to notice, first of all, you're going to get that growl, aren't you? And then you're going to get the teeth maybe, and then you're going to get the bark. And that's what we need to develop. You might focus on a physical task, clear a cupboard, something like that. And then once you've done that burn off, then go, okay, what am I reacting to and why? I find it's difficult to do it until you've released all the pent-upness though. To calm down, we might want to do breath work, as Claire said. Yoga and Qigong, massively recommended. Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score, recommends yoga and Qigong. We can orient in time and space. So we sit, noticing the chair, noticing the floor. I'm in my dining room. I'm 62. Here I am, looking at all your lovely pictures and ornaments and photographs and bringing yourself back into the here and now. Another nice one is to connect with the kidney adrenal interface. So that's behind you in the back, just above your waistband. If you put your hands flat, you have to stretch around a bit, but put your palms flat on that kidney adrenal interface. Place your hands there. You might want to rub, but just having warm hands. And again, that calming message, we're all safe. Thank you, kidney adrenals, but we're all good. So that we can stop that adrenal from escalating. So I might sit with my hands on my kidney adrenals for 5 minutes, really letting the warmth seep into that place. That works really well. Then you've got the self-hug. The self-hug is you take your right arm and you lock it under your left arm across the heart. So right hand tucked under your left arm, protecting the heart. The left hand comes up and over to hug the right shoulder. And that self-hug held with a slow massage is, again, that oxytocin production. Any kind of vibrating sound will settle the vagus nerve. And a classic one is the sound of voo, ah. And you're after really getting some vibration going. And it's not boo, it's ooh, like a ship's sort of horn, that kind of foghorn type of noise. So you're after a big in-breath and then do that 5 times and you'll feel different. So you're after a foghorn voo. Another one, tell the nervous system you're safe. Just think it, say it. Nervous system, we're all good. Thank you. I know this is triggering, but you know what? This isn't life-threatening. Okay, to bring up energy. So let's say you've been in the old freeze response, you've been down the other end. You might want to snap yourself up and out so you can come up into the green space. So this is the opposite way now. So now we've got to come back to feeling. So now we're after, really bring some life back in. Maybe stamp your feet a little bit. If you're in a meeting, just wiggle your toes in your shoes. Just rub your hands a bit. Just bring some life back into the system. Clap a little bit. Slow rocking side to side. Where it's just a very gentle, and you can do this in the supermarket queue. Just very gently shift your weight on your feet, left to right. All this bilateral side to side stuff really does work to reset. So you can go side to side, just rocking on your feet, using the side edges, or you can go backwards and forwards, noting mindfully all the feet positions. Oh, so now I'm on my toes. Now I'm on the balls of my feet. Oh, now I'm on the middle of my feet. Now I'm on the heel, rocking forwards again. And then doing circles that incorporate all that. Side, toe, middle, heel. Just nice circling using the feet is a real mindful way to bring the system back up. Orienting time and space again. Or you might want to swing your arms with a twist. So twisting from the spine is brilliant because, again, as Claire said, we're actually doing something to the vagus nerve as we twist the spine. So any kind of swinging side to side work is brilliant. If you want to bring your left brain activity back online, we maybe do a bit of simple sums. So you might set yourself, 5 times 14. Yeah, and just do a little bit of mental arithmetic because that brings the left brain back online. Sing softly to yourself or hum, because again, that's the vagus nerve. Softly singing, humming, just making vibration in the jaw, behind the ear, down the neck, down the back, and down into that vagus nerve. Engage with your comfortable others to return to the ventral vagal state. So that's the social activation system where we feel comfy amongst others. We're social animals. We're meant to feel comfortable together. So choose your resources here. Choose who you try and do that with. Also, connect with your healthy anger. And if we've been sent into the freeze situation, maybe something's been not right. Maybe someone's, transgressed a boundary here. And we need to connect with that healthy anger and actually say, do you know what? That's not right, actually. We can bring that energy up. It's okay. A lot of us were taught to damp down our anger and never connect with it. But actually, we need to connect with our healthy anger as well. And identify what triggered the freeze in the nervous system. What was that? What was that trigger about? What did it bring me back from? So that's a way to bring energy up, and we did a way to bring energy down. I've got 2 more slides, so I'm going to ask about this now. Triggers are always going to be individual, are built in our own childhood experiences. So we've got to build our own self-awareness. You know, what triggers me? What puts me in over-arousal and what puts me in under-arousal? So develop awareness of your own sources of over-arousal. Any anxiety, pent-up feelings, anger, critical judgment, that can mask deep feelings of hurt and pain, and what we're doing is externalizing it. So rather than saying, gosh, that really hurt me, we go, what a nasty bitch. You know, and that's actually us externalizing hurt feelings. Anything like irritation, frustration, tension, bored, panic, a need to get going and doing, all that stuff can be mild triggering. Notice what you're thinking, feeling, doing. Am I slamming around? Am I whizzing around quickly? Am I fidgeting? Or am I zoning out and getting really still? And develop awareness of what puts you into a freeze shutdown state and what puts you in a fear state. What situation was this similar enough to from earlier life? So these are some of the suggested, you don't have to, but it might be nice to talk about these in the breakout rooms just to get us going anyway. So that's just a thought. And so lastly, I want to talk about food really quickly. Depressing foods, now when I say depressing, it doesn't make you miserable, it brings down overactivation because they soothe us because they need a lot of digestion, and they depress the adrenals and lower stress. And this is stuff like dense, heavy, rich foods, fried foods, dairy-rich foods such as creamy, cheesy pasta, that kind of stuff. Balancing foods don't bring the nervous system up or down. They help repair slowly, and they're all your whole foods, green vegetables and beans in particular, any kind of bean, water and herbal tea. In stressful situations, this is what you have for lunch. You know, put these foods into your lunchbox or your evening meal, and that'll help us manage stressors really well. And stimulating foods, we already know, are caffeine and sugars. So that was just a quick blimp into food there. So I'm going to close now, and we're going to go into the breakout rooms. But this is just an idea of things you might want to talk about. Which situations are similar enough to old situations to trigger you? What responses from others make you freeze, shut down and go into blue zone? What gets you over aroused and into red zone? And which situations allow you to be in steady state, green zone? So I'm going